Everybody, welcome to the advanced training for RMS, RMS PMO. I'm going to be having Paul McGuire giving this training today, I believe. But I just wanted to welcome everybody today. Note that we're going to be able to have various times for questions after each major section, and of course you can always write your question in chat, and we can have those addressed as well. And those can be written anytime. We may address it via chat or during the response time during the question time after each section. Also note that we do have an RMS YouTube channel where many of these topics go into more depth, and you might be able to see exactly what you're looking for, scrolling back and forth in the time, going, okay, step-by-step process. But this will give you a good jump start on a lot of those things. So anyway, I wanted to welcome you. Thank you for attending. I'm going to pass it over to Paul now. Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Alrighty. Good morning, everyone, at least here in California. I'm not sure where all the rest of you are, but good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. All right. This is the advanced RMS users training. We look at some of the other modules inside of RMS. The goal of the session is to kind of cover some of the stuff that administrators would deal with, whether or not you're an office administrator or a district administrator. We try to go through some of the financial setups, and then we will go through the import-export options at the end with the real property closeout stuff. One of the big things that we need to mention is the fact that this training is just going to be going through how you use RMS. It's not necessarily going to be telling you how to use RMS when it pertains to your job on the job site or in the field or in your office. Every district has its own regulation, its own way of doing business, and will use RMS a little bit differently. So we can tell you what to do inside of a screen when it comes to RMS, but when it comes to what you actually put inside of RMS, that's usually something you'll have to go to your specific district about in order to get information on what exactly to put inside of RMS. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to mention too is that inside of WebEx, we have a Q&A panel. So you'll notice inside of WebEx that there's a chat panel and a Q&A panel. A Q&A panel will allow you to put in questions and kind of summarize them all for everyone. The chat panel, you'll notice the chat panel will scroll, and after about 10 minutes or so of the meeting, whatever's in the chat panel will be, in the history, right? You'll have to scroll up to see it all. So inside of WebEx, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A panel if you would like. It kind of makes it a little bit easier for us to answer them. I mean, we'll be watching the chat channel or the chat panel as well. So, but just letting you guys know, the Q&A panel is there if you'd like to ask a question. It makes it a little bit easier for us to answer. Alrighty. What are the topics that we're going to be covering today? We have the main menu. We're going to be going through what RMS looks like, from the office, the libraries, the system libraries, the district libraries. We'll be going over adding line items, pay activities, dealing with changes and modifications. We'll deal a little bit with schedules. We'll go through some of the import-export options that are maybe not as well known, and we'll go through closeout. And like after every single section, we have an opportunity for questions. That's something that a lot of users ask for in these trainings, is they want the ability to ask questions. So during the session, you guys can type out questions in the Q&A or the chat, preferably Q&A. And then when we get to the question section at the end of the section, you're more than welcome to unmute your mic and ask a verbal question if you'd like. All right, let's get started. Okay, we're going to be going through local office, district library, system library, some of the summary reports, and the RMS staff screen. All right, when you open up RMS, the very first thing that you'll get is a list of contracts, right? Up on the top left-hand corner, you have the option to go to the local office and all the way to RMS staff. Those are the modules at the very top. So this is not when you're inside of a contract. This is outside of a contract. RMS has a hierarchy of collections for contracts. So you can have a bunch of contracts in an office, underneath another office, underneath another office, underneath a district. District is kind of the highest collection when it comes to contracts. So in our test database that we have here on our screen, which is it's mirrored after Baltimore District, we have a whole bunch of sub offices, and you can have offices underneath that as well. In those offices, and including the district office, you can have contracts assigned to them. One thing to note that there's a selection in the middle there. You can expand all or collapse all without having to hit the little arrows on the left-hand side. So on the right-hand side, there's those expand collapse. It allows you to open up all the sub-offices in one go instead of one at a time. Each one of those sub-modules that you have there, the description, policy, documents, routing slips, whatever, they're all based on whatever office you select in that office tree, right? Okay, moving on. Inside of the office description. Now, this goes for every office inside of the district. You have the ability to go in and select who is the office manager. You can put in the organization codes, address lines, the location, and whatnot. What makes the office manager position very important is the fact that here at the RMS Support Center, we get a lot of questions from users going, hey, I need to know what to do inside of RMS for my specific office. And it's real easy for us to go here as the RMS Support Center and go, oh, hey, there's an office manager here. We can refer that person to the office manager. So for example, I had somebody asking a question, hey, I need permissions for a specific office. Who do I contact? And we get those fairly often. So keeping your office description information up to date really helps us out here to help other government users in your district. So one thing to note too, there's the office type. You see the office type? One thing that a lot of offices do, or districts rather, is they'll create a training office. What's really great about the training office is you can add a whole bunch of contracts to RMS and it will not affect your summary reports, your contract status sheet with dollar amounts that pull all the information from the district. So you can create a training office and have somebody add a contract for $600 million and it won't affect the placement of the district. It also allows new users to go in and play around with, with contracts without having severe consequences. So training offices, there's quite a few districts that have them. I wouldn't say they're widely used, but it definitely helps when it comes to training because a lot of times, like for myself, when the way I learned RMS was to go inside of a contract and just start playing around, seeing what happened. What happens when I add this? What happens when I run that? What happens when I change this? And training offices are a great way to set that up for new RMS users and just let them at it. You can give them full access to contracts inside of that training office, and you can copy contracts left and right. Anyway, and again, keeping this information up to date definitely helps us as well. All right, inside of the local office, you have office policy, and again, this comes down to how your specific district does things, and inside of your district, your offices may do different things as well. So we allow a policy of locking the daily reports based on the office. So say I'm in a specific office inside of a district, and the office manager for that office says, we are only going to allow the most recent QA daily report to be modified after completing it. It's fairly common that we get somebody asking, hey, I need to go and change a whole bunch of old QA daily reports because of some reason. I need this week back, right? The office policy, some districts allow within a certain amount of days. So when you choose that middle option there on the screen that's in front of you, you'll get a little box that says, how many days old do you want? Or allow editing of any completed daily report. I think most of them have the most recent, and that's usually a default throughout most of the districts that I've seen. But anyway, this can be set on a per office basis, and this has to do with QA daily reports. Once they're complete, can you go back and change them? Some districts have a real strict policy of nope, you can't. Other districts, you can go and change as many as you want. Right, and this applies to all the contracts under that specific office. So setting these, usually you set these once and you really never deal with them again at this level. I should also mention too that a lot of you, if you are not office administrators or district administrators, some of the stuff that we'll be going over here in the next 15, 20 minutes may not make a lot of sense. That's because the only way to get to these screens is to be an office or district administrator. And for the office administrator, obviously you won't be able to access district administrator stuff, but district administrators can access office administrator stuff. All right, so the office documents, we had a request to put our document package manager inside of an office collection. so that an office could store their Word templates or documents that are commonly used for that specific office, or other important documents that they want to store with this office. So you can hit the add button as many times as you want to add specific document packages that you can drag and drop from your Windows Explorer into RMS to store files. Again, RMS has a per file limit of 250 megabytes in order to put documents inside of the document package. Alrighty. And again, if you have the question, what do you put in here? All up to your local office or district. Alrighty, mod routing slips. So this is information that you can put inside of here for the modifications for the specific office. It will pull from these fields depending on your local district policy. Even if you use these, that's up to your local district. Some districts use them, some districts don't. This prevents you from having to add this every single time you go in and do a specific mod. It saves time for contracts. All right. Okay, moving on. These are interface schedules. What does that mean? RMS 3 has background batch processes that go and sync RMS up with CFMS and P2. If you guys are wondering what those two are, P2 has to deal with milestones and dates and dollar amounts. CFMS, of course, is the Corps of Engineers financial management system. If you're wondering, when your contract will get the latest CFMS sync without you having to click CFMS download manually, you can go here and see what time the batch process will get around to doing your district sync. Obviously, it doesn't happen right away. That way we don't overwhelm the network. There is a set time when this specific office will go and get synced up to CFMS or P2, and it all happens in the background of RMS. You don't have to leave RMS running. This happens on the server side in the background. Ready? These are the office user entries. If you guys are wondering what these are for, again, these are mostly for macros and Word templates. So if your office uses a whole bunch of Word templates, you can set up letterheads that automate the address for your specific office so that those letterheads can be filled out with information that you don't have to fill out every single time you go and add a document. This is handy for those Word templates, and that can be done on a per office basis as well. Okay, inside of your local office, you've also got the ability to set required milestones for every single contract. This view does show system milestones, which cannot be changed and cannot be turned on or off, but you can add local milestones. Say your district has a specific milestone that has to be done on every single contract. You can require it here at the local office milestone view. Keep in mind that those blue tiles at the top are sort options, so you can click those and you can sort the milestones based on construction, whether or not they're after construction or local office or whatnot. Again, a lot of these, if they're not local, they will not be editable. The system is going to be read-only and whatnot. Same for district level. All right. Inside of the the local office, we have a contract archive. So this is a fairly recent addition to RMS. I think it's within the last year or so. You have the ability to archive contracts inside of RMS 3.0. With 2.3.8, any of you guys that have used RMS back in the old days, we had to archive contracts frequently to keep the selection view from getting too slow. With RMS 3.0, you don't really have a slow selection view with a lot of contracts, so archiving was not necessarily a priority because RMS 3 can handle a lot more contracts than 2.3.8 can. But say you do want to archive some contracts just to put them into storage, you can go in and you can mass archive contracts. Note the buttons on the top left-hand corner. You've got archive a contract, unarchive a contract, and export contract files. Those don't look like buttons, but they're buttons. And you can multi-select on the left-hand side. So I can select 4 or 5 contracts and hit archive, and it will take them off of the selection view and put them into this archive list. Now you're going to note we have an contract archive for both district and local office. The reason for that being is that Some districts didn't want their local office administrators to have all district access to all the contract archives, only their office archives. So that's why we've got a collection of archives for a local office, a collection of archives for a district. Please note too that the export contract files, that button is becoming more and more dangerous because contracts in RMS are becoming larger and larger as time goes on, right? As more and more things get digitized, we're noticing that contract sizes are basically exploding. What the average contract size in RMS 2.38 was a couple megabytes. In RMS 3, some of the contracts we have in there are on the order of terabytes because of all the files that are added. So if you hit the export contract files on a contract that's terabytes long, plan on leaving RMS up for quite some time, because it's going to take a long time to download that, especially over certain connections. One thing too that you might not know, especially those of you overseas, you do not have to be connected to Core VPN in order to use RMS 3 government mode. I was talking with somebody from South America, and they had a real terrible connection when they were on the Core VPN. So you, as a government user, as long as you have a CAT card reader, you can install RMS 3 on a computer and use government mode with your CAT card, and you won't have to be part of the VPN. The reason for that being is because RMS 3 relies on a DMZ web API, our website, rms.usa.army.mil. So that can be real handy when you're dealing with exporting contract files. So again, pay real close attention with that export contract files, especially as if you're doing a recent contract. That can take a long time. And again, you can multi-select. So you'll notice the unarchived column on the right-hand side, whether it's archived or not. Right? You can sort it by that as well by clicking on that that black button there. Anyway, yep. Just keep in mind contracts. So if you have a question, hey, when do I need to archive my contract? That's a district policy question. So definitely refer to your local district administrator. Or commander or whatnot. Do you have to archive contracts? Again, that's local policy. From our perspective, you don't necessarily have to unless you want to. I think I forget what local Army Corps of Engineers policy is. It's like 8 or 10 years or something like that. Anyway, moving on. Alrighty. And inside of RMS 3, we've got a P2 projects module. Those of you that have used 2.38, you'll notice that with 2.38, you had to manually go in and sync up P2. With 3.0, there's a batch process that goes and links up P2. And yes, we are very aware of the recent problems that we've been having syncing up with P2. And we're working with CEIT as well as P2 to try to remedy that connection problem. So we are very aware of some issues that we're having connecting up with P2. We're working on that, and we hope to work with P2 to resolve those issues. But just so you guys know, the reason why this is under construction is there's a batch process that runs in the background, and it's been fairly good keeping things synced up, right? So we don't have that manual sync button for that. Alrighty, moving on. But just so you guys know, that's something that we're considering or we're working on in the future. All right, so we moved from local office to district office. Again, local office only pertains to those sub offices. It can be a side office, resident office. It can be however you guys have it configured. District is the highest one, right? It's the entire district. So in this case, this is Baltimore district. So this is the highest level. You need district administrator permissions to get in here. This one is a little bit more involved because you've got the user roles, you've got placement, you've got the very important prime contractors to set up contractor access to RMS 3, and you've also got the archived contracts. All right, moving on. Again, the district office has a screen that's very similar to the local office. Putting in this information is really helpful for us when we get people asking us, we've had questions like, hey, I'm an office administrator underneath so-and-so district. I need to get the district's point of contact. And so putting this in helps us like you wouldn't believe. And again, you can put in information here that helps with submittals, and these office addresses also help with other things as well. So you can put a latitude, longitude in there if you want as well. And of course, on our training office, every single one of our offices are training. So on your screen, it's not going to show training on the office type, but that's why it's showing training here, because our test database, which is kind of an old mirror of T2, is all training. E1, which is Baltimore. All right. Moving on. These are the position titles. These have to do with when you're going into contract personnel, I believe, inside of the contracts. They also deal with signature position titles. These things apply to everything inside of the district. So you can go in here and pull from these kind of like a master list and add, edit, delete those. And this will affect every single contract underneath this district. Contract user roles. This is where you're going to be setting up the permissions from the RMS staff. There's a fairly recent addition to this screen. That's the linked staff tab. So instead of having to wonder, hey, I've got 52 user roles, who's assigned to those user roles? Now you can go to the linked staff tab and see who all is assigned to that specific user role, instead of having to hop out, go over to RMS staff and open up staff one by one, right? And these can be customized down to, specifically, administration modules, QA/QC modules, finance modules, closeout modules. You can set them for read write, read only, or no access. So, say for example, you've got a group of interns from the local college that, are going to be helping you, monitor certain things. You can give them read only access with a role title of intern. That's a real popular one that we've seen. And then you can assign that user role to specific contracts or to offices. And so there's a lot of power when it comes to what you can do, but it also makes it a little bit complicated, right? Because with those abilities comes, a lot of customization. Anyway, but yeah, keep in mind that linked staff tab makes it really easy to find who's assigned to what user role, especially when we had some districts ask us, hey, I'm clearing out some old, user roles, and I'd like to see who's all assigned to them. So I think that was a CCB change request. Anyway, all right, moving on. Okay, and just like you had local office policy with the daily reports at the district level, you have a few more options when it comes to the policy. You can set placement policy, modification policies, and submittal policies. These are, you can dictate how many copies will be returned to the government when it comes to the SF30, and changes based on placement, for your entire district. Keep in mind that usually you're not going to be changing these on a day-to-day basis. This is something that usually gets set a long time ago and doesn't get touched because changing these will have significant impacts on contracts that are already inside of RMS. So if you call up RMS and you say, well, what do I put in here? Well, I'll tell you, defer to your local administrator, right? Your district administrator, whoever. If you say, what happens when I change these options, we can tell you that, right? So that's real easy for us to answer. Excuse me. All right. So moving on. Okay. So this is the mod policy. How many days after creation that, this needs to be done. Your district may require plans for every single mod or negotiations or whatever, right? Some districts don't, some districts do, and they all have, possibly different dates that are required when, due dates when it gets done. This is, so these are for the mods. Moving on to submittals. This just has to do with the review periods for different submittal types, government acceptance for information only and whatnot, and whether or not copies are required. I'm not even sure if they do that anymore. I remember when I started, 7 was a real popular number of copies, and I remember people telling me they had filing cabinets that were, blocks long with all the copies that they were putting out back in the day. So nowadays, a lot of stuff's done digitally and whatnot. All right, moving on. Okay, prime contractors. This is a very important screen. Why? Because this is how you get your contractors into RMS. Now, you may be wondering what's the difference between this and the prime contractor screen inside of a contract. The difference is this is the collection of all the prime contractors that you can assign to contracts. So when you open up a contract and you go to administration, prime contractor, and then you hit the blue tile for the prime contractors, it's going to pull from this list. If it's not in here, you won't be able to add it to the contract. So it's very important that, usually a district will have a couple people that manage this list. Again, you have to be a district administrator to come in here and add a prime. You'll notice too that there's no UEI number. There is a new release of RMS coming out very soon that will have the UEI option, and you can go in there and add that. But that'll be the next release of RMS. Just letting you guys know that that's coming out. So inside of here, you're going to add the prime contractor. Once you add the prime contractor, you'll need some information on that prime contractor. Then you can go inside of your contract. Once you open up your contract, you can then assign your contract to a prime. Then the next step is you've got to assign contractor staff to the prime contractor. Now, those of you that deal inside of contracts, you'll probably be a little bit more familiar with that action. So, that's where you're adding the very first prime contractor staff to the prime contractor, if they don't have staff already. So a lot of these have been around for a while and they have staff already. So when you add a prime contractor to a contract, you might go to the contractor staff tab and notice that they already have staff, but you need to make sure if they don't have any staff, you have to add at least one. And that first one has to be an administrator. And usually the government will say, hey, that contractor, that very first administrator will add the rest of the contractor staff. I haven't seen, so usually they're the ones adding the rest of the contractor staff. And you will not be doing that in this screen, in the district office screen. You'll be doing that inside of contracts. But they do have to be here first. So if you go and you inside of a contract and you're looking for a prime contractor, you can't find one, you've got to contact your district administrator, ask them to add the prime so that you can assign it to the contract. All righty, here we go. This is the FY baseline placement. This is based on schedules for placement generation for the fiscal year. And there's really not much to talk about here. Every district will do this a little bit differently. Inside of here, you can open this up and you can change what affects the projected placement, the baseline placement and whatnot. It's very complicated stuff that's pretty far over my head when it comes to finances. It can get really complicated, and again, we can help answer what happens when you change values, but we really can't answer what you put in here. But most of the time, we don't get too many questions on this module. All right, dredge names. Okay, so we noticed that for some of the dredging districts, they were having to add the very same dredge to a whole bunch of contracts inside of their district. It was the same one, right? So usually you've got dredges that work across districts or in multiple districts. So the district has the ability to add one dredge and assign it to multiple contracts. This comes real handy when you're going to do summary reports based on that dredge. So instead of having to open up 20, 30 different contracts that this dredge works in and pull a report off of every single one, you can go to summary contracts and work on the dredge production report and pull all the work that this one dredge does. So you can add dredges at the district level. Again, those of you that are only contract administrators, when I say contract administrators, it's at the contract level. You won't be able to go in here and add these. These have to be done at the district level. So you can ask your district administrator to go, hey, I'd like a district level dredge so that I can assign that to all my contracts without having to add one every single contract. So that comes in handy for that. And again, we have a archived contract screen for the district office level. This is the entire district. So this one's a little bit more dangerous than it's a lot more dangerous than the local office one, because again, you don't want to go in here and mass select everything and archive them all, because that'll set off a background process that'll run weeks, days, and it will be a very noticeable effect on the network. So keep that in mind, especially if you're archiving contracts that are recent for whatever reason, right? some of the contracts that we have recently are approaching terabyte size, and it can take a long time on CoreNet to move that data around and archive it and whatnot. Older contracts, they're usually super tiny. We're talking in the megabyte range, so they're not even a drop in the bucket when it comes to when it comes to size reduction, right? So it's really it doesn't really help anything from a storage perspective when you archive an old contract, because the new contracts take 40, 50, 60, 70% more. You see what I'm saying? So you do not have to archive unless you want to. Again, from our perspective, we don't care. Your district may have policies in place where, you know, a contract after 15 years must be archived. That's fine. You can go in here and archive those contracts. And again, you can sort this view on all those black buttons with the little filter tile on the right hand side. You can click those or drag and drop them up to the column header to sort by those. Alrighty. All right, the system library. We get a few people asking us, you know, hey, well, what's in the system library? The system library is the library that we here at the RMS Center maintain and keep. That means no one except the RMS Support Center can go in here and update these values because they're hard-coded into either the database or the application or whatnot, usually the database, right? So, so sometimes we'll get people calling us up and saying, you know, hey, these agency codes, I need this updated. Or headquarters will come in and say, I need a delay code for COVID, right? So they'll ask us to update that. You know, there's query definitions for custom reports and whatnot. That's where all this is. Everything on the screen is going to be mostly read-only for district administrators. We used to have an old system administrator permission inside of RMS, and I don't think we have that anymore, but those were really old RMS admins that kind of helped us with some of this stuff. But anyway, that's old school. All right, let's go on. RMS Asset Store. So we noticed that in every district, there's usually one or two RMS administrators that are real active, right? And that's not to say the rest of you aren't active. It's not that at all. What I mean is district administrator from like division levels. So some of these district administrators, they would fly around to a whole bunch of divisions, and not even their own, and they would help. They would, they do custom reports. They deal with queries. They deal with templates, and these administrators were asking for a place inside of RMS to share that information, because when, so and so went to a district, they noticed that the administrator there had a lot of great stuff and put a lot of time and effort into, say, custom reports, and it was real easy just to copy that stuff and put it into their own district. So district administrators can go here and pull information if it's posted. Obviously, the district administrator in that district has to put their stuff here first, right? Whether it be contract groups, templates, report templates, or user roles or whatnot. You put those here, and then you can copy these down to your district, right? So this comes real handy in that aspect. There's a lot of work put into this area, and you can contact some of these people, and a lot of times they're willing to help you work out how to get it integrated into your district too. Say it's a custom report or whatnot. So this is a place to share that information. Obviously, with the change from fast reports to Telerik, the custom reports have had a lot of activity as well. But this is shared across all districts, and you can sort it by district and author and whatnot. All right, moving on. Okay, this here is the fund types. How your contract is funded. Again, at the district level, a district administrator can go in here and they can say, my district's never going to be working with a certain branch, right? So we're not going to check include and lookup. So that means when I'm creating a contract or dealing with a contract, I won't be able to select that option from the fund type, right? So you can check all of them if you want. You don't have to check, all of them if you don't want. All right. Same thing here for the program types. Notice you don't necessarily have the ability to edit these, but you have the ability to choose whether or not they're options inside of your district. And again, this is only for district administrators. So those of you that work in contracts that aren't district or office administrators, this stuff, you'll never deal with it, never have to worry about it. And usually this is kind of a set once and forget. All right, here are the contract status codes. Again, to get changes to these, usually you have to contact headquarters or the PMO, the RMS PMO, because this is something that only RMS can change. Usually we get directions from headquarters when it comes time to change these things, so if you're wondering why something isn't here, usually you're going to have to contact someone above us. When I say above us, I'm talking PMO headquarters level. But it definitely helps us, by the way. So some of these things, the delay codes, again, those usually come from headquarters. It's really rare to get some of that stuff from the contract level. Same thing for the modification reason codes and whatnot. Notice some of the COVID codes down there; those came from headquarters. Definitely, if you need a change to these, definitely work up the chain to get that done. All right, these are the FAR references for contract modifications. Again, this can only be updated by the RMS Support Center. So definitely feel free to contact us. We definitely love to help you, especially if you notice something's not quite right or there needs to be a change. We can at least point you in the right direction. So again, these are system level library collections that apply for all the contracts in your district. And usually system level is the same across all the districts. So you'll notice that there was local office level, there was district level, and then system level, right? So from our perspective, offices are unique on every single office. Districts are unique on every district. System has to do with every single district in the entire Army Corps of Engineers, right? So that from our perspective, system is going to be the same across Army Corps of Engineers. So change here will change everything. So for example, when you're creating a transmittal or a spec section, right, you're going to be pulling from possibly the master format 04, the 95, or the 2014. So that's where these lists come from, right? And again, they're not editable. It's hard coded into the database to pull from. So this applies for every single contract inside of the Army Corps of Engineers. So it has a wide effect range. All right, and these are the PD squared CLIN units. Again, system level, won't be able to really do anything with it. Most of the time, you're not going to be in these screens. Out of all of the time I've ever used RMS, I rarely open up these screens, right? So we're just showing you what they look like. So going through these one by one. All right, these are the 1354 category units. Again, these have been updated fairly recently. We had an action from, I believe it was the CCB, to go in here and kind of change this up. You guys will notice with the real property, the contractors have the ability to go in and we'll be talking about this later, to fill out an interim 13 real property item. So perfect. Yep. So this is something that we have to update here. So this changes fairly frequently. So we get requests from users going, hey, I need an updated category code on this list from the Air Force or whatever, right? So we'll get a permission from our bosses, the PMO, and then we'll go in here and update these. And usually that'll come out in a because this is database level. Sometimes updating the database works. Other times we have to go and do a new patch for that to happen. All right, these are the RMS reports. These are the system level reports that we created inside of RMS. Now, note, district administrators, you have the ability to go in here and look at the templates for these, save off the templates, change the templates, and make them your own. So inside of here, you can edit these, and I believe you can save the templates locally. If not, you can go and create a custom report and base it off of one of these system level reports. So every single report that's in RMS that's from us is here and viewable, and it can save a lot of work. So say your boss tells you, hey, I want a report just like RMS's report, but a little bit different. You can go in here, copy the template, call it your own, and put it inside of your custom reports, and boom, there you're good to go. All right, and query definitions. What are query definitions? These are SQL statements that you can use to populate your custom reports. So there's usually a handful of people or less inside of every single district whose primary job is to do custom reports for the district. Some districts don't have any, some have one, right? And you can go in here, and it's limited to select statements only. And you can go in here and pull data out of RMS and put it inside of a custom report, right? So you can select all the contracts that have a dollar amount over a certain amount. But again, remember, this is district level permissions. You have to be a district administrator to access this portion and whatnot. And so this stuff definitely hits the very advanced user. Some of this is on the level of developer. But anyway, these query definitions, you can share these across districts as well, and apply them to a custom report. That's the idea. You can also just run them and dump the results into an Excel spreadsheet as well. So there's a few RMS administrators I know that do that as well. Excuse me. And again, at the system level time, remember how we were going through some of the local offices on when the batch processes in the background will hit their district. So this is the entire Army Corps of Engineers, right? Each one of those district IDs, those are EROCs on the left-hand side. So E1 being Baltimore District. For us at RMS here, we tend to use those contract IDs a lot because it makes it real easy for us to, one, figure out what district it's in, and two, the contract ID at the end becomes real easy to find as well versus a very long contract number. So you'll notice that usually when tech support asks you for your contract ID, it's the E1000123 contract ID, not the W912, whatever. Because from our perspective, it's real hard to figure out W912, what district is that in? We have no idea. You say E1, boom, right away, we're opening up Baltimore District. We know that's in there. All right, perfect. And again, nothing can be changed here, but the guys gives you an idea when will, somebody from, say, Seattle District calls you up and says, hey, when will the batch process for CFMS get to my contract? You can look here and usually by then, assuming there's no network problems or whatnot, it'll hit that contract. Alrighty, the summary reports screen. Now, this is a different area than the first four modules. So we went through the local office, district library, system library, right? Those four require permissions to get inside of. So you need office administrator to get into local office, district administrator to get into district office and library, and usually full district admin rights to do stuff in the system library. Summary reports, those are limited to people with CAT cards. So contracts that are overseas that have foreign nationals without CAT cards accessing RMS, a lot of these summary reports are not accessible to them. Same for finances. So if I have foreign nationals going to the job site to do the QA role, they can only access certain parts of RMS. They cannot access summary reports. They need a CAT card to do that, of course, and permissions and whatnot. Now, I think when these slides were created, the legacy reports option, obviously that pointed to the old report engine, that has been retired. So we just have Telerik now. So ignore that part on there. We have inside of summary reports, these are reports that pull information from the entire district. That's what makes these unique, right? So I can pull all the transmittals from all the contracts inside of this district. But that also means, for example, if I run a contract status sheet and I've got a fair number of contracts in my district, it can take some time to pull all that information into a report and put that onto the screen, right? So some of these, those of you that deal with these on a regular basis, you'll know that some of these can take some time to run. You got to be patient with the network and whatnot, and eventually it'll dump out the data onto a report. And again, these are summary level, so they're all the entire district. Each one of those blue bars at the top, those are sorting tiles, right? So you can click on administration reports or financial reports and get it sorted based on those blue tiles. Yeah, and usually when you open up these reports, you'll get additional options to run specific report options, like on certain types of contracts and whatnot. So it can get fairly complicated. All right, the RMS GIS screen. This module is, well, let's just put it this way. It's got a lot of data in here. You can sort the information that these modules pull from based on contracts or offices on the radio button on the top right-hand corner. Yeah. basically has to do with location information, right? And reports based off of location information. Inside of RMS, we've kind of had a pull towards certain different directions when it's come to GIS. So those of you that do work with GIS and RMS, you'll know that we used to do certain things with location, then we didn't. Then we kind of did, and then we didn't again. So it's been going back and forth. I think there's still a lot of talk on the potential of where location and RMS comes from, but they're definitely hitting a lot of. It becomes very sensitive, right, on certain job sites and whatnot. So there's a lot of background talk going on at headquarters level when it comes to these modules. So moving on. User settings. Okay, so user settings have to deal with your client that's in front of you. As I was telling you guys, you do not need to be connected to the VPN, the core VPN, in order to use RMS 3. And that applies for both government and contractor users. Obviously, contractor users won't be connecting to the VPN. But my point is that I can go to Walmart and I can buy a $400 computer and I can install RMS 3 contractor mode on it and plug in my CAT card and log into government mode. Because the application RMS has both government mode and contractor mode on it. And the DMZ server, that RMS, the DMZ server, it sits on the DMZ network. So everyone, including those that are on the VPN, connect to rms.usa.army.mil to access the database behind CoreNet, right? So what this screen is, this is a screen that allows you to customize settings for your application that's in front of you. And usually you're never really going to be doing much here, right? Office administrators, district administrators, you guys are going to be opening and closing a lot of contracts. Say a contract administrator, those of you that deal with just a contract or two, your cache size isn't going to be as large as somebody like a district administrator or division administrator who goes in and opens up dozens and dozens of contracts on an hourly basis, right? Some of these district administrators I talk to, they're going to have 10 copies of RMS opened at the same time, which, by the way, if you didn't notice or if you didn't know, you can have as many copies of RMS running at once, as many as you want, really. So a lot of these district administrators, they will have 10 copies of RMS running, and that's a lot of cache size. So if you have a government computer that can't handle a lot of cache size, you can limit that cache size. Or you can go in and just delete the RMS data folder if you want to, right? You shouldn't do that unless you absolutely have to. But I have seen government computers that only have a couple gigabytes free, so you can go in here and you can kind of limit that cache size. RMS does try to intelligently manage the cache as well as the patch sizes. You guys, those of you that have used RMS 3 from from 2016. We go in and delete the old patches because one, you can't run them, so there's really no point in keeping them, right? And whatnot. So also on here, there's the old 2.38 option of, hey, when I close a contract, the next time I open up a contract, do I want it to open to that same screen? So that's what the user preferences portion of this module is. You can check the box that says, if I open up finances and I open up contract changes and I close that contract and I open up another contract, do I want it to go to contract changes? So usually district administrators will check, yes, I want that, because they're going to open up 10, 15 different contracts that all go to one module, and it saves a ton of clicking, right? Those of you that deal with a couple contracts, you're probably not going to want that option. You'll want to leave it default, right? Because you're not going to want to go in and have it open up to the same screen every single time you open up RMS, right? I usually go back and forth on these because a lot of time I'm testing or I'm working with a specific contract. That checkbox there that says subscribe to RMS government updates and news email lists, just so you guys know, that checkbox, all that does is let us know if you want updates. Right now, it doesn't do anything. We have been working with CEIT to create a government approved DLL list to contact y'all. And it's surprising how difficult that is. And I think that's because of spam regulations, and it's not easy to send out large amounts of email without having it approved by CEIT in the first place. So we've been working with the PMO and CEIT on that. Right now, if you check that box, that'll let us know if you want to be notified with updates and news. If you don't check that box, in the future, when we integrate this into a DLL list automatically, that'll let us know, hey, you'd prefer not to get that information. Now that bottom portion, I'm not sure if you guys will see everything on there. That stuff was designed for users that were doing testing with us in the past. So right now, I don't think you'll be wanting to deal with anything on that aspect. Just leave it on normal mode. That's the default right now. In the future, if the PMO decides to open up testing to users, you can choose those options. But right now, I don't think they do anything when it comes to RMS. All right. Okay. RMS Mobile. Okay, so this was the iOS Android app from a long time ago. We had a request from users saying, hey, I go to the job site with my cell phone and I take a ton of pictures, and I'd really like an easy way to get those pictures into RMS. The document package was kind of an answer to that, because you could open up Windows Explorer and mass drag and drop hundreds of files inside of the document package, right? Or from your cell phone or whatnot. RMS Mobile had a lot of restrictions on it because of security reasons, and it kind of limited what it could and couldn't do. And of course, that kills a lot of the potential for that application. So that got retired. It's no longer, I believe, it's no longer available for download because it hasn't been touched in years. So that's why that's there. It's a placeholder though, because there is a lot of requests. There are a lot of requests for a mobile application. I think the CCB is very aware of that. Same for headquarters and whatnot. So they're trying. I believe they're trying to make that work when it comes to security and all that stuff. And of course, that opens up a Pandora's box when it comes to security. If you can imagine, there's a lot that goes into the certification of those things, and the waiting lists to get that done are sometimes in the years. All right, moving on. There we go. Okay, so the RMS staff screen. District administrators, you'll be real familiar with this. Here is where you add your government users. You'll notice in the past with RMS 2.38, the reason why I keep mentioning this is just in case there's any of you that have used that in the past, you had to go in and get your staff a UPass account and then a CAT card. And then once the UPass was set up, you get them access to RMS 2.38. With RMS 3.0, all they need is a CAT card. So you give them a CAT card, you can go in here and you can hit the add button, and you can add their CAT card, the 10-digit number on the back of their CAT card, to their staff record and link up their CAT card to a staff entry. Give them permissions to contracts. They can install RMS on their computer. Again, if it's a CEIT computer, they need to go to the CEIT App Store, App Store. And once they install that on the CEIT computer, then they can plug in their CAT card and log into RMS, and boom, they're using RMS right away if they have a CAT card, right? As long as that card has a 10-digit DoD ID number on the back, you can use that CAT card to get into RMS. Now, of course, that doesn't just mean I can take any CAT card, plug it in, and access, right? A district administrator has to go in and assign a staff record with permissions to that CAT card. So this was all, and when we were developing RMS back in 2015-16, this was all approved by the CEIT in order to have this run on their network. So all these layers of yes, I approve, which is also why district administrators have the responsibility of keeping this list up to date, right? We can't go in here and delete accounts because they may be linked to actions inside of contracts. So when you delete them, all it does is mark them as deleted. It doesn't necessarily remove them from existence because of the memorandum that we got that said you cannot delete, you have to leave them here because of past actions. A common question that I've gotten is, what do I put in for the RMS ID? Again, that's up to your district. You can put anything you want in there. It could be test. It could be new 1, 2, 3. Usually what you do is you base it off of your district, right? So you do G300001, and then the initials, right? For the person, or it could be whatever you guys want. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is that the CAT card number is correct. So that 10-digit DoD ID number, you put that in and link them up. They have to register their CAT card in the system. So a new user will put in their CAT card. It'll register the account, if it cannot find a staff entry to link the cat card to, they won't have access to anything, right? Same thing as a contractor. If I log in, if I install RMS 3 and I'm a random contractor who's not contacted government, and I create an account, I'm not going to have access to anything, because a government user has to give me access to a prime and then assign the prime to a contract. From a government's perspective, if I just say I'm a new government user, I got a cat card, I plug it into RMS, I'm going to log in, I won't have access to anything. A district administrator has to go in and assign my cat card to his staff and then give me permissions to certain contracts or offices. Or if I'm so dubbed to be, I will be a district administrator or an office administrator. It's, some of the questions we get to is out of district personnel, how to deal with those, just like a normal user. Sometimes you can create multiple records when they're out of district or whatnot. So it's all how you guys want to deal with this. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put in an RMS ticket. We'd be glad to help you out. Usually when there's questions on this module, it's fairly advanced. So we usually send those up the tier chains. Okay. Alrighty. That ends the introduction for the offices, the staff, some of the summer reports, system libraries, and whatnot. I will let you guys ask questions, so please feel free to unmute and ask if you haven't typed in a question already. You're allowed to do both, so it doesn't have to be one or the other. I will stay quiet for maybe 10-15 seconds. If I don't hear anything, we'll continue on. Feel free to ask questions if you'd like.
There's a question in the chat that I just saw. It's asking, what is the difference between the pre-release version of RMS and an updated policy option? I'm asking for some clarification. What do you mean by the update policy option?
Hey, I was talking about that screen that Paul was on where you could choose when you received the various updates.
That's actually for the update policy. That's going to be, are you talking about the caching screen that's on the view right now?
Yeah, the screen that's up there right now.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
those down at the bottom and anything below the user preferences doesn't really do anything at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so in the past when RMS 3 was created, the USAs at the time basically said, hey, we want the ability for users to say, yes, we'd like to help test, right? Now we have a specific user acceptance team and user acceptance testers group that's a combination of government users and contractors. So this was kind of disabled. It probably should be removed because it doesn't do anything. Same for that checkbox. But yeah. So to answer your question, right now, don't worry about those. They, as far as I know, they don't do anything, and it probably shouldn't be there because right now the PMO, I believe, handles the UAT group. So if you want to be part of that and you're a government user, I think you want to contact the RMS PMO, and that was one of the members of the PMO. He was the one that started this training off.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I'm on the pre-release. That's why I was curious whether that did anything there.
Oh, got it. Yeah. So from your perspective, we have RMS 3. Those of you that may or may not be, I see some of you that are on the UAT group. The pre-release should only be run on T2. That's that district off to the left-hand side of the map view. That's where, because a lot of times the pre-release will have database changes that only apply to the T2 district. And then when we release, we apply those database changes to the rest of the districts. Some of the changes you can do on production, right? So for example, that daily report issue that we had with large contracts that was slowing down because we changed the way the selection view displayed the daily reports. You could run the pre-release on production to see if that fixed that. But right now there's quite a few database changes in this one. So if you run the pre-release on production, you could get a crash, right? I would not recommend running the pre-release on production. And then usually running the release, the production one, which I think is 343 right now, you can run that on T2 and on production, but you could get a crash if you run the release on T2. So just something to keep in mind.
Yep.
And that's handled based on the launcher, right? So when you created that extra icon on your desktop of the RMS launcher with that /P, that's for UAT, that's for the pre-release. And again, not anybody can do that, right? Because we'll have to give them access to T2 and all that stuff. So anyone who's hearing this who's not part of the UAT, just just ignore what I said. All right, cool. Any other questions before we move on? Good question, by the way. Alrighty, perfect. Moving on. All right, we're going to cover the finances tab. James is going to be helping me out a bit with this because he knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. But we're going to be going through some of the modules in contract finances, dealing with contract setup, we're dealing with word CLINs, current CLINs, pay activities, changes, and finally modifications. You'll go a little bit over disputes and whatnot. Again, you guys are more than welcome to type out questions in the Q&A or in the chat. And as soon as this module is done, we'll have another where you can unmute and ask questions. So really appreciate these questions. Thank you. Alrighty, this portion of the training has to deal with how funds are used to fund the contract, right? Inside of RMS, kind of the whole point to RMS is to get the contractor paid, right? In return, that's also how the government makes money, right? With construction, right? So you're going to set up a contract. You're going to assign the contractor to the contract. You're going to want to make sure to fund the contract. You'll set up the line items that total the contract amount, and it needs to match the contract number and delivery order number need to match what's in P2 as well as CFMS so that they can link up when those batch processes run in the background of RMS. And then everything communicates, and hopefully when the contractor goes and asks for a small portion of the contract amount, you guys can go in and approve that. A lot of this stuff, one thing that's real important is that we here at the RMS Support Center, we do not have access to P2. We do not have access to CFMS. Some of us that have been here for a very long time, we know what they look like. Like me, I've been here since 2005, right? I have never opened or run CFMS. Do I know what it looks like? I have an idea of what it looks like. I've seen some screenshots as well as some government users show me. And P2, I've never seen P2. I think there was one time where somebody was sharing the screen and they had the new web-based P2 up. So from our perspective, we are not allowed to support those applications. Those are other government AISs. They have their own support departments. We cannot support them. We can, however, do our best to help you interface with them. So for example, the P2 problems that we've been having recently, we're very aware. We really appreciate you guys contacting us, letting us know that there's problems. And then we work with P2 and CEIT to figure out what's causing the disconnects, right? And you'd be surprised. A small change on one side or the other can break those connections, and it can take a little bit of work to get those connections back up and running. But same things for CFMS. A lot of times we'll get people calling up, hey, I messed up, this, I did this in CFMS. How do I get rid of this in CFMS? Well, we can't answer that, right? We can usually help, and we some of us will have an educated guess, but we've been told you have to go to those guys' support groups in order to get help on it. But we can definitely help when it comes to interfacing and on RMS's side, right? Because RMS has got to download the finances from CFMS. Now, the screen that you're looking at right here, you'll notice that some contracts that you open up will have future contract. Right? Future contract means that the milestone schedule has not been set up yet. So if you open up a contract, this is usually on contracts that are brand new and that haven't been set up all the way. If it does not show these modules under finances and it shows future contract, you're going to need to go to schedules, contract milestones, and set that up all the way. It's usually NTP, contract award date, contract completion, and a few others. I can't remember what they are. Then you can go here and set up the finances. All right. These are all the submodules inside of finances. Again, if you see future contract, you know what to do now. In here, these are usually fairly complicated when it comes to setting them up. So there's usually, the government users who are in the daily reports and deal with other things. There's usually another layer of government users that deal with finances. So a lot of times we'll get questions on how to change some of this stuff. If you don't know what you're doing, these modules are very dangerous because they deal with dollar amounts. And a lot of times when you get to a point of no return in these modules, it can take a lot of time to get out of that point of no return. And that's when interest is accrued, right? So it's very important not to wait till the last day to deal with problems. And two, make sure not to change anything in these modules unless you're fairly certain what you want. And again, that's where the training office comes in handy, right? If your district doesn't have one, ask your district administrator, hey, can I get a training office? And I want to play around with these modules to see what they do so that I know what not to do or what to do on a production contract, right? Because a training office will not link up to CFMS. Training office will not be part of the placement reports, right? All right, so this is the contract finances screen. If you're like me, you look at this screen and it's a lot of information that doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense. When I say that, it's because this is one of the more complicated modules that deals with downloading information from CFMS. So inside of CFMS, obviously you have obligations, right? You've got funding accounts, and all that will get pulled down to RMS, and you'll use that to fund your line items inside of RMS. CFMS does not see the line items inside of RMS, if I'm correct. James, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Those obligations and funding accounts are used to fund the line items and the contract amount, and those line items are then used to total out to the pay activities, which then are sent out to the contractors. So you have you have the contract amount, which the contract will be funded by obligations and funding accounts and whatnot. Then you have the line items. Then the line items are broken down into pay activities, and those pay activities are then sent off to the contractor, and that's what the contractor asks for when they ask for payment, a percentage of those pay activities. Those pay activities are the very foundation of pretty much everything inside of RMS. Those pay activities can be linked up to dozens of different things. Schedules are based off of those pay activities, and we'll get into the pay activities a little bit later, but obviously it all starts here. So the government's going to go in when you add a contract. Usually you're going to set up the milestones. You'll link everything up to CFMS. You'll link everything up to P2. This is why it's very important when you're linking stuff up to P2 that inside of the contract description, you have the correct contract number. Whether or not your contract number has dashes, whether or not your contract number has spaces. Because a lot of times when things don't link up with P2, it's because of that. They don't have spaces, or they do have spaces, or the delivery order number is a little bit different than what it was inside of P2. Not having those synced up will also affect CFMS as well. So you can go in and change that and then hit the CFMS download button, and that will do an immediate, I want to pull information from CFMS now, instead of waiting for that batch process that we talked about earlier to finally get around to your district and pull data from CFMS. One thing to keep in mind as well, if stuff doesn't look correct here, that's probably because it's not connecting up to CFMS, or it's not entered into CFMS in the first place. I've had a fair number of government users call me up and say, hey, there's nothing in here. And then when it was checked inside of CFMS, there was nothing in CFMS. So again, keep that in mind. CFMS has to be set up correctly in order for RMS to pull that data and populate these screens, right? So CFMS cleanup, James, can I get you to talk about that for a minute or two? Go ahead.
Sure. So the CFMS download typically just downloads all the financial items from CFMS, which are, of course, the appropriation, funding accounts, PRNCs, obligations. The CFMS cleanup, however, what that will do is to remove any financial items that do not exist in CFMS. So they may have been in your contract, but if they're not in CFMS, then they will remove those if those have not previously been used. So there is a warning on the CFMS cleanup that if you run that cleanup and say, for example, you have the contract number wrong, then it will not see the obligations, for example, in CFMS. And when you download it, it will actually remove the obligations. So you have to be a little careful on the CFMS cleanup. We used to do only the CFMS cleanup with RMS 238. Nowadays, we just do the CFMS download, so we don't actually remove financial items when they're missing from CFMS. Back to you, Paul.
Awesome, thank you. All right, yeah. In the past, I remember that CFMS cleanup button was a dangerous button that we used to tell people, make sure not to touch it unless you absolutely want to. So perfect, very good. All right, very, very good. Again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to type them out. At the end of this section, you can unmute and ask questions. This is a fairly complicated part of RMS, and if it doesn't work right, please feel free to put in a support ticket, and we can do what we can to help out. But again, if it has to deal with CFMS, we won't be able to help out much there in terms of on CFMS side. We can tell you what RMS shows and whatnot. Okay. Oh, yep. So there we go. So there's a warning message that James was talking about with the CFMS cleanup button and whatnot. Again, if you're in these modules, be very aware that there's severe consequences to stuff that you do inside of these modules. If you're not sure what you're doing, do it inside of a training contract or ask somebody who knows what they're doing. And that's why I have James here, because he knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. Okay, all right. So after contract award, data inside of CFMS will get into RMS. When that batch process happens, those funding accounts will populate, and you can use those funding accounts to fill out the contract funding portion of RMS inside of here. So you use those funding accounts to set the work items, the program types, and whatnot. And usually inside of this module, you're going to be working from left to right, right? So you have the CFMS Finances tab. You'll start there and work your way all the way to the right-hand side. It's usually how most of the modules inside of RMS are kind of laid out, right? You usually go from left to right. All right, so here in the project funding screen, you can go inside of here and fund the contract amount, right? So the contract amount, by the way, is going to be the basis for your line items. All your line items have to match the award contract. And that award contract has to be funded. So when you go to do your first invoice, if it's not fully funded or the line items don't match the award contract amount, RMS is going to put a stop to pretty much anything you're doing until all those things link up. But once you set these, you usually don't have to deal with them again unless there's a mod or or something that changes those funding variables in the future on the contract. Alrighty, these are the funding balances. Kind of gives you an overall idea of the funding accounts inside of RMS and their effect on the contract. Note, you can select these options, and the data down below in that bottom box there will change based on what funding account that you're highlighting. For whatever reason, if that funding account can be used by other contracts in your district or in your office, you can check that box there that says account can be used to fund other contracts. If it's a sufficiently large enough funding account with dollar amounts that won't be just used on this contract. Say there's a whole bunch of work order numbers that are similar, right, on the same job site or whatnot. All right, moving on. And again, these are the obligation balances. Not much to say here other than it basically takes the obligations, shows what their funding account is and the contract that they're under. Again, you select these and the information down below will show the history, right? It'll show your payments that you've had on those obligations. So say, 200 pay activities are based on this funding account, the O2 funding account. It would show payments to date, earnings to date, the amount in CFMS and all that stuff. So again, this is where downloading from CFMS comes in pretty handy. All right. But you don't need to hit that button, by the way, unless you absolutely want to, because that batch process runs in the background. One thing, too, to keep in mind is the note contract finances are recomputed on the server side every single time this view is displayed. Those of you that used 2.38, you'll note that when you opened up the finances screen, there was a whole bunch of loading bars that went through and recomputed all the finances. That happens on the server side now, so you don't get to see those loading buttons. And it will let you know when that was last recomputed based on that date there, right underneath the CFMS download, CFMS cleanup button. So that can be real handy, especially on larger contracts, because those of you that did use 2.38, you notice that on some of the larger contracts, especially with 20, 30,000 pay activities, that could take some time. All right. The next screen we're going to be looking at is the award CLINs screen. This is going to be the screen where you set up the line items for the contract. This screen will not change once it's been added, right? And you don't want to change this after it's been added. So when I create a contract, I link it up to P2, and I get the milestones set, and then I link it up to CFMS, and I get my funding accounts, and I put in an award contract amount. I'm going to go in and add line items to total up the contract amount. Notice bottom right-hand corner. There's no variance there. Obviously, when I add the very first line item, say for the 250,000, right, for the removal of topsoil, there would be a massive variance between the contract amount and the line items. So you keep adding the line items until they balance out. Once they're balanced out, you can move on to the pay activities. Please note that once this is added and you move forward, you do not want to go back here and change this, because that'll get you to a point of no return when it comes to finances on your contract. You don't want to go in here and delete these and change these, because technically, once you set this and you start doing payments on these, you want to do modifications on your line items, right? So keep that in mind. This will show your award CLINs at time of award going forward. So if you have a whole bunch of modifications, this screen will always show what the CLINs were when you created the contract. Right? Adding a new line item. Oh, yes, perfect. Okay, so when you go and add a new line item, you're going to have a choice between a price parent CLIN and a price sub CLIN. James, if I can get you to explain those two, you do a much better job at that than I do. Go ahead.
So as the screen is saying there, the price parent CLIN is used when you have sub CLINs that you want to have different types of funding. So if you have multiple types of funding, you will have to have a priced parent CLIN and then put those different fundings on the separate sub CLINs, because you cannot put the different types of funding on a single sub CLIN. So that's mainly why you would use the parent CLIN with the sub CLINs. Back to you, Paul.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so this is the screen of adding a price parent CLIN, right? When you go in and you add a line item, you're going to have to choose your unit of measure. You're going to have to choose how the line item is funded, right? So inside of here, give me 1 second. Set. All right, perfect. All right, so inside of here, once you set the award price, right, based on the unit of measure, whether it's quantity or quantity, right? You're going to check that box saying, all right, this is done. The pricing is complete, ready to fund. And then you're going to pull from those funding accounts that you got from the screen before. So you can kind of see, right? When you're making your contract, you're going to be moving from one module to the end, right? Kind of the same way in the transmittals, right? You start at the spec sections, you go to the submittal items, and the end goal is a transmittal that you send off, right? So here, you start at contract finances, you get to the award CLINs, you assign a whole bunch of line items, you fund those line items with the CFMS funding accounts, whether or not it's CFM or non-CFMS, right? And once you get all those added, the end goal is to total up to the award contract amount. Now here's a fairly detailed screen on some of the most common questions that we've gotten when it comes to the line items from users. Some of the hints that we have. Usually the people adding these contracts, they've done it for many, many years. So a lot of times they don't have questions for us. But those of you like myself, who's very interested in how these people are working inside of RMS and do their magic, you're more than welcome to download these slides. If you go to rms.usa.army.mil, the slides are listed there. You can read this on your own time. Again, a lot of this stuff, we can't answer what you put in here. We can answer what happens when you put stuff in here. So, what do I use for a unit of measure? We cannot answer that. That's a policy-based question, but we can tell you what happens when you do choose a certain type of unit of measure or a quantity, right? That changes the way that the line item is managed inside of RMS. We can also tell you what happens when you do sub-CLINs and how you number or deal with those sub-CLINs and how that affects the parent CLIN and whatnot, and how you can change those sub-CLINs to different parents and whatnot. All right, moving on. All right, so we're moving on. We went from award CLINs to current CLINs. The current CLINs, by the way, that is the current state of the line items. Notice when we were on the award CLINs, it was an $8 million contract, right? Now the current contract's $8,050,000. So this is going to show you the result of mods up until this point in time, right? So there's been a mod somewhere that added $50,000 to a line item, or it was a new line item itself, right? So again, the award CLINs, you don't want to touch that after you've created it. The current CLINs will show you what's happening to the CLINs after the contract has started, the effective mods. So you can select CLIN number 1, and the history of CLIN number 1 will show below. Same thing for number 2. You select number 2, CLIN history for number 2 will show below. All the modifications done or whatnot. All right. So pay activities. Pay activities are the next level of breaking up the line items into a more detailed expenditure, right? So, you saw some of those line items. Well, they'd have laying down the foundation, putting, and whatnot. Some of the pay activities will be a breakdown of that further, right? Digging or putting up cement, doing piping and whatnot. So, again, we can't really tell you what to put, but most government users, what they'll do when they create the contract is, because you can't do a payment until, and RMS complains bitterly, right? If it's not balanced, the activities need to balance to the line items. The line items need to balance with the contract amount, right? So usually what the government does is they just go in and add one pay activity to mirror the line item. So if I've got 5 line items, I, as a government, most often will go in there and just create 5 pay activities that match and mirror the line items. That way everything's balanced. The contractor can go in and upload their schedule, right? So at this point, usually after that, you're going to be having the contractor do this work. The contractor is going to be using a network analysis system, right? Primavera, for example. Most contracts use Primavera. There's some smaller contracts where you can have RMS do the schedule, and they can manually do the payments inside of RMS. If your contractor is using Primavera, it's very important to note that Primavera will be considered the system of record for finances. So anything done in RMS that isn't in Primavera will get wiped out next time they do an SDF import, which also means if they go inside of RMS and mess up stuff and they're using Primavera, fix it in Primavera, do another SDF import, good to go, right? From your perspective, there's only a handful of contracts that I know about where the government requires the schedule from the contractor and the government does the SDF import. So most of the time the contractor is going to be doing the SDF import. SDF stands for Standard Data Exchange Format. We'll be getting to that. Just letting you guys know the pay activities, it's usually the contractor's job to go in and add the pay activities. But of course, the very first time you guys got it, most of the time you guys do it. So that way warnings aren't flying all over the place about this not being balanced, right? Inside of the activity screen, we have breakdowns. So you can sort the activities by whether or not they're assigned to a line item or not. You can go to the CLINs and see all the activities assigned to each CLIN. Or you can go to contractors, subcontractors, right? And the features of work and see what's all assigned there. So usually to get to the point where we're at right now, obviously this is government mode, right? Because it's blue on the top right-hand corner. It's contractor probably went in and already did an SDF import, right? So what we're looking at is them having done the SDF import. We see that they broke down some of the activities further, right? Number 1 being the removal of topsoil, demolition, the filling, concrete, sidewalks, and whatnot. This usually comes from Primavera. Government usually doesn't do this. Again, it's up to your district, your local district policy. This is what the CLINs tab looks like inside of the pay activities module. So they can double click on those line items and see all the activities assigned to those line items. Those of you from 2.38 days know that this was very limited, what you could see, what was assigned to what. So RMS 3 kind of breaks this down. You have the ability to sort unbalanced versus balanced, and it makes it real easy to find problems. Again, if you see an unbalance, the whole idea is you want to fix it in Primavera if you're using Primavera, because if I go and fix it in RMS, the next time I do an SDF import from Primavera, it's going to be unbalanced again. See what I'm saying? So if your contract requires the contractor to use Primavera, they need to fix it in CEFMS. They need to fix it in Primavera. However, you can use RMS to kind of identify, oh, hey, and by the way, you guys as the government people can go in here and say, hey, I see an unbalanced on CLIN number 8. You're off by this amount. You need to make sure to put a dollar amount on there to match that and balance that. So it allows you as a government to kind of see what the contractor is doing, what it looks like, and whatnot, right? So, okay. Same thing for the contractors. If they have subcontractors, how many activities are assigned to those subcontractors. Remember, I told you activities are kind of the foundation of contractor mode. They use those activities and that schedule to do a lot of stuff inside of contractor mode. Smaller contracts, of course, they will not deal with a lot of this stuff, right? Small contracts with small dollar amounts and whatnot, they won't use Primavera. They may not have any subcontractors, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very dependent on your district and your district policy and your specific type of contract, right? But in this case, it makes it really easy to see how many subcontractors are not assigned activities, right? Doesn't mean that there's a problem. It just means maybe they didn't start yet, right? Or, or whatever. Who knows, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem. Okay. You'll notice that too in the activity, the action items. Inside of RMS, the action items allows you to kind of see what can be done. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to be done, but it could be done, right? So the whole point of the action items report on the contractor and government side is to say, hey, this wasn't done. Doesn't mean it has to be done, but it means it wasn't done, right? So something to keep in mind. Same thing here with the features of work. Again, a lot of this stuff comes over from Primavera. You're not going to, you as government aren't going to be doing anything with this other than look at it. The contractor usually will be the one going in here, linking everything up and doing an SF import to make that happen. Okay. Yes. The activities, one of the big things with the government, right, is whether or not they're scheduled, the start dates and all that stuff. So smaller contracts, you can go inside a contract setup and you can set up the contract to manually enter start and finish dates, or default is to do an NAS schedule, right, with Primavera. Obviously, Primavera is fairly expensive, and usually it's larger contractors that have that, or they go out and they hire those schedulers. So again, inside of contractor mode, this is usually stuff that the contractor is going to be doing. They're going to be putting in their schedule. They're going to be doing the pay activities. Use the government. You'll match the pay activities to the line items. That way to make it real easy for them. And so RMS isn't complaining about unbalanced or anything like that. And again, start finish dates, not something that you guys will be dealing with. That's usually something that comes from the contractor side. And I think this is just a further breakdown of information on what it looks like with the pay activities tab, right? So we kind of went already over this. You can sort these based on those tiles at the top. Down at the bottom, note the balancing of the line item. Makes it real easy to see, hey, this line item is obviously not balanced. So that's the problem one, right? Same thing here. Those blue tiles at the top allow you to sort. All right, inside of an activity, this is what it looks like when you have a quantity-based CLIN. So cubic yards, right? I believe there's quantity CLINs and amount CLINs. So I'll go back to that other screen just to give you an idea of what those two look like. So when you have a line item that's lump sum based, this is what it looks like when you assign a pay activity to that line item. I'm going to go back. When you assign a pay activity to a line item that is quantity based, this is what this looks like. Obviously, this is from the government's perspective, right? This is not from the contractor's perspective, because the contractor cannot go in and change anything with the line item, right? So this changes how those are based. Yeah. And for some of our dredging contracts, we have the dredging tabs at the top when it comes to pay activities, because certain districts deal with activities and dredging based on certain ways. All right. Now, we're assuming we're at the point now where we have the contract. We've linked it up to CEFMS. We've done the P2 download. We've got the schedule in there. We've contracts funded, no problems with CEFMS. Contractor may have asked for their first payment or two, usually on a monthly basis, right? It got paid in CEFMS. RMS is fine. There's no red warning lights. Now, of course, the contractor says, oh, hey, there's a delay, or there's an increased cost that wasn't originally scheduled, right, or planned, or resources for XYZ went up real high, whatever. You're going to be going in and you're going to be doing modifications on the contract amount. So instead of going to the award CLINs, hitting edit and changing the amount there, don't ever do that. That'll damage so much you have no idea. You want to do a modification. To do a modification, you're going to start with a contract change. Once that contract change gets finalized, you're going to then go over and do a contract modification, right? So the contract modification doesn't have to be a change to the dollar amount, but it usually is, right? So depending on how your contract's set up, and especially for the credits, right, where the money goes the opposite direction, right? Usually a mod is to add stuff to the contract. Contractor's asking for more money, but anyway. So we're going to be going over modifications and how to do those. All right, so this is still the pay activities. When you're adding a pay activity, remember, as the government, you want to add pay activities to mirror the line items. So you can hit the add button. I think there's an option when you hit the add button to manually or to automatically add a corresponding pay activity to each one of the line items. But anyway, if you're going to hit the add button, some of the questions we get, well, what do you put in for the activity number? Well, it doesn't matter, right? Usually as the government, you're going to mirror the line items, so 0004. When the contractor does their SDF import, that's all going to change anyway. So you're just being nice to them, getting everything balanced, and giving them a little bit of a, hey, this is all balanced. This is what it needs to look like when you do your SDF import. Because if you do your SDF import and things aren't balanced, it's not going to look like this. It's going to look all red and errors everywhere, right? Okay, here we go. So a breakdown of what it looks like inside of an activity, right? Again, as I was saying, the contractor has the ability to take these activities and assign them to everything. Subcontractors, features of work category codes, whether or not it's a dredging contract, you can assign it to a dredging feature, and whatnot. And from the contractor's perspective, when they're adding this, whether or not it's balanced or not at the bottom helps them out as well. Remember to hit the back button to save the information on the screen. Going out of a module initiates the save for that module. I think in the beginners training we also had we let y'all know that refresh button, when it's spinning, it lets you know that there was a change done that you might want to get on this module that you're on. All right, moving on. So we have you can edit the activities. Now here's the thing, right? You rarely want to do this. Why? Because if you're in a contract that has Primavera, any change you do in this area is just going to get wiped out next time you do the SDF import, right? Unless it's a contract without Primavera, a network analysis system where they're manually entering start and finish dates and manually doing their schedule and activities, then they're not going to be doing any of this. But if they are, then this is what it'd look like, right? You go in here, RMS will let you know very clearly if there's a variance when you're adding up your activities, and whether or not it totals out to the line item, right? So you as the government, you're more than welcome to come in here and look at all this stuff, double click on it, see what it looks like, see if there's a variance or whatnot, because obviously it's your contract, right? So you want to see what's going on in your contract, right? So you can go to the import export screen and you can go to the import SDF NAS and see what the contractor's doing when they're importing their schedule, as well as going to the actual pay activities or the schedule, right? The activity schedule. But again, if you're using Primavera and you're changing stuff on the screen, that should be a big red warning light, because all that needs to happen inside of Primavera. We have the ability inside of RMS to go in and delete records. Again, I'll say it. You delete something in here and you do another SDF import, it's going to come right back. So if you're using Primavera, make sure to delete it in Primavera. Then do an SDF import, wipes it out of here. But say you're not using Primavera, RMS gives you the ability to delete multiple or all activities in one go. So you don't have to sit there and click, delete, right? You can move your mouse over the delete button, and then you have the option of multiple deletes. Keep in mind that when you're doing multiple deletes, you can't come back from that, right? So a lot of times we have people where I just want to start fresh, right? It's the first invoice. We've done the first invoice. And I just want to start fresh because obviously I messed it up real bad. You really don't want to go in here and delete stuff unless you absolutely have to. And I would talk to the RMS support center first, because one, if you're using Primavera, you shouldn't be deleting them in here. Two, if you've already done an invoice and you're going in here and deleting stuff, that's going to cause a lot of problems, right? And usually you as government people, you might have dealt with this before, where the contractor's gone in here and wiped out everything. Again, if they're using Primavera, no worries. If they wiped out everything, that's fine. Just have them do another SDF import and they're good to go, right? But if they don't use Primavera, then they'll have to sit down and fix this manually, right, inside of RMS. But say they do, for whatever reason, want to wipe out all their activities, you can do that in one go. Don't have to sit there and click each time, especially if you have 20,000 activities, right? But usually if you have 20,000 activities, you're using Primavera at that point. Okay. Yep. So be extremely careful. Doing this is a point of no return. You really can't come back from this when you delete these activities. Feel free to contact the RMS Support Center. Again, you're using Primavera. You shouldn't be doing this in the first place. All right. Now we're going to move on to contract changes. So as you can see, we're kind of moving from the left to the right, correct? So we got contract finances, awards, the current CLINs, the pay activities. At this point, say it's a brand new contract, you're going to, you can send off the contract to the prime contractor and have them work in contractor mode and go on. So contract changes kind of assumes the contract's been going on for a while. There's been some changes to the dollar amount on the contract, or the contractor's wanting more money, or there's a dispute, whatever, right? So you're going to go in here and you're going to go to the contract changes. The whole point of the contract change is to pop out a basic change document. So a lot of the modules inside of RMS, they tally up to a report, right? The QA/QC reports, the transmittals, the ENG 4025, the payments, all that stuff, right? So, the whole point of RMS is to fill out these reports with data inside of RMS. So when you're inside of a contract change, a lot of the fields that you fill out are to generate a report, right? So inside of contract changes, what we have here is the list of all the changes. Now, you can create as many changes as you want. They don't get finalized until they go off into a mod, right? So it's fairly common to have a lot of negotiation happen, right? So you can negotiate with the contractor, and then nothing happens, right? So that's fairly common. So you can go in here and you can negotiate on changes and decide, no, we decide not to, or whatever, right? And you can have several of these going on at the same time. So there's kind of a status at the bottom when you select those. It kind of gives you an idea of where they're at with those green check boxes, whether or not they've been completed, moving on, or whatnot. Obviously, you gotta complete all those to get them to the point where they can go off to an actual modification and modify the contract. So change is what you're thinking about doing. Modification is, okay, we're going to take that change and modify the contract, right? Okay. So we have what it looks like when we add a new contract change. Adding a contract change is not as difficult as you'd think. You can add contract changes that have many parts to them, right? And you can add those parts later. They don't have to be added right now. So when you go and add a contract change, you have the ability to choose how you want that change to be added to RMS. And again, these are not permanent, right? This is all still in the what if phase. So you can add these and delete them later or whatnot. It's not a big deal, right? Anyway, so you can add a single part contract change. Once you add that, you're going to get a screen that looks something like this, right? And again, you're going to work left to right. That's kind of the foundational rule of RMS, right? You're going to be starting at the left, work your way all the way to the right. The end goal is once you get to the right, you can pop out that end document for that module. In this case, it's the basic change document, right? So here inside of RMS, you have the Inception tab. Here's where you put in your dates, the agency codes, the reason codes, the mod types, and the staff that the modification will be done by. And again, just so you guys know, that BCD icon on the top right-hand corner, if you're ever curious what the BCD looks like before you complete out the change request, you click on that button and it will try to generate a BCD based on the information that you have on the screen in front of you. So if you're filling this out and you're like, hey, what does the BCD look like so far? You can hit that BCD button and it will try to generate based on what you've got on your screen right now. Again, you're going to go in here and you're going to fill out information in regards to the change request. You'll note too on some of these boxes in the mods and the contract change screen that some of them are in a fixed width font, meaning they're like Courier New. And the reason this being is because some districts copy and paste information from other applications to these screens, and they wanted them to look nice with that fixed width font. So they have tabs and things totaling out. So it's not necessarily an error inside of RMS. It's because quite a few districts asked for that, and that's what was done in these modules. So if text looks a little bit different, that's the reason for that, right? And again, once you guys get done filling this out, you can run the temporary BCD on the top right-hand corner, and see what it looks like up until now. All right. Okay, very good. Moving on. So here's the status and funding tab. So this is fairly important. So you're going to go here and you're going to check boxes on what's required, what isn't required, and whether or not it actually has a change amount and the time for that amount. And then, very important, at the bottom left-hand corner, you've got that status drop-down. So that lets you know whether or not this change request is actually moving on to something that will change into a mod, right? So it's very important that you keep this updated, right? Because people are going to be looking at this change request, excuse me, and that status will change over time, right? As more and more things get completed. There's some of the districts that I've looked at, or some of the contracts that I've looked at, a lot of these changes requests get to this point and then kind of never see light of day, right? Depending on the contract, of course, and the contractor and whatnot. But yeah, so that status has got to be set before you can continue on and move off onto the right-hand side, right? So let's see here. Oh, okay. So we already. So just so you guys know, the supporting documents tab is for the document packages. If there is a claim in dispute based on a specific change, you can go there and do that there. Again, document packages, you can drag and drop a whole bunch of stuff into a document package from Windows Explorer based on this change request. And as always, you can run that BCD report up on the top right-hand corner. It's not the official one, but it's the one based off of the information so far. So as we were saying, the whole point of a change is to get it to actually modify the contract, right? Because it's a change to what we've done in the contract. So inside of contract modifications, here we've got the list of contract modifications, and just kind of like the contract status, excuse me, the contract changes. There's green check boxes to let you know where each modification sits in RMS, right? Whether or not it was actually done, what it did, whether or not all the tasks are completed or not, right? There we go. All right. So my voice is kind of giving out on me, so I'll keep going on. If I get to the point where you guys can't hear me, just let me know. All right. So we have contract modifications. Yes. So now we're going to go in and see what it looks like to get that. What is it? The SF30? I think that's what it is. Let's see here. Yeah. Yep. SF30. All right. So inside of RMS, the modification is a little bit more complicated than the change. You can go in and you can assign multiple change requests to the modification. And again, in order for those change requests to show, they got to be completed, right? So I've gotten people call us up and go, hey, I can't see my change request when I go to add the modification. Well, that's because the change request isn't completed. It's got to be, all those checkboxes got to be complete. The status has got to be approved, right? And the modification can add CLINs or modify specific CLINs for the contract. And obviously, if you're adding CLINs, adding money, you've got to fund that, right? So you'll have the option of seeing the funding accounts, which again, it's important. You got to be working with CFMS on this as well, because the funding accounts come from CFMS. So this tab requires a bit of work to get everything linked up the way you need it. Again, these modules, the whole goal is to fill out all the information on the end report, right? So you're going to go in here and you're going to fill out this information, whether or not contractor signature is required. You can title it. You can some of the stuff inside of RMS too. I don't know if you noticed that blue little notebook icon next to the box. You can click that and get a much larger window to copy and paste stuff into or type into, if you so want. So say you have a lot of information, you can hit that little blue notebook icon with the pen, and it will pop out a larger edit window. Okay, and again, these are additional blocks on the SF30 that you can fill out, and that's how they refer So this is, you type the stuff in here. When you go and run the SF30, that's where the information is going to be pulled from. Same thing here on the SF30, the third page. You can copy and paste information in here from other applications. You can type it out. You can you can just type it out. Again, that blue notebook icon if you need a bigger one. Government signature, who's going to be the contracting officer, the COR or whatnot, the ACO, all that stuff. It's all on these screens. And just like the contract changes, say you're halfway through this and you're kind of wondering what it looks like, you can hit the SF30 button on the top right-hand corner to generate the contract modification document to see what it looks like up until this point. So it's not real apparent, but underneath the help icon on the top right-hand corner, there's the SF30. So same thing here. You're going to be going in and going to this tab, choosing, if contractor signature is required or not. Again, we can't really tell you if it should be or not. We can tell you what happens when you check that box, right? So we get a fair number of policy-related questions sometimes from government users when they call up. Again, at the very bottom of this screen, you've got to check that box in order to go further with this mod, right? So once everything's completed, you check that box and off you go. You can get to the point where this mod's released, right? This will let you know, the changes that you've done. If they're a dollar amount, we need to basically change the contract amount, right? Get everything to the point where everything balances out with the pay activities. Because if there is a change, everything's going to be thrown into an unbalanced state, right? And it's fairly common when we get calls from contractors where they got back from a meeting with the government and they went to their contractor mode and they already had their scheduler change the pay activities to match the change to the contract, and so they put that into RMS, and guess what? Everything's unbalanced because the government hasn't had the chance to go in here and do their part, right? Or vice versa. Government goes in here and changes it, and the contractor took a couple weeks to get to the point where they can balance it out. So this will cause an unbalanced state on either the government side or the contractor side. So the timing on this is kind of important when it comes to dealing with mods, especially mods that have contract changes amounts, right? So you can go in here and you can kind of see whether or not the line items are changed by this amount. And this is just what it looks like, the activity screen, and whether or not there's a variance. So that variance at the bottom is real helpful because it lets you know, hey, does that resolve the problem, right? All right. And you guys will probably note, those of you that have worked in RMS for a while, that there's no longer the big list of modification checkboxes that you have to do. There was a change request to go into the document package and have the ability to assign all of the documents required for a mod direct to the PCF cabinet inside of the document package, instead of doing the click, checkbox, click, checkbox, click, checkbox. So it was fairly unpopular. So here you can add as many document packages as you want. In the supporting documents tab or the document package, you'll notice that inside of mods, you have the PCF container. Now it's a little squished because in order to get it to fit on the screen, we had to size down the image. But anyway, on your screen, you'll have the ability to drag and drop all the modification documents, and then in one go, assign the PCF container for these documents. We do not have access to PCF, so some of the questions that we get is, hey, I need this container, or I need to add this container, or I need to get this document in that container. That's usually stuff we really can't help with when it comes to changing PCF, but we can definitely change RMS, right? So if you have any questions or concerns or changes, definitely let us know. Put in a ticket and we can help you out. But this was a CCB request that sped up the modification process significantly. So you can just drag and drop these in here. One of the CCB changes as well, which I believe is out there already, you have the ability to copy all the documents from the change into the mods. So instead of having to drag, drop, you can do that in one go. So this is kind of a new feature in RMS. So some of the old RMS users that come back, they're like, hey, where's that screen with all those checkboxes? Well, here it is. This is inside the document package for a mod package, right? And again, just so you guys know, with the document package, you can open up Windows Explorer and drag and drop a whole bunch of files in here. Again, if they're large, we have a 250 megabyte limit on each file, but you can drag as many files as you want. Usually with a mod, you're not talking massive documents, right? You're just talking a handful or two, and you can drag and drop those in here, and you can export those out in one go with the export selected documents option on the top right-hand corner. You do not have to use the drag and drop attached files here box. You can use that white space in the middle right above the date of the document. So there's two areas you can drag and drop documents into. Obviously, this picture is squished, so it could fit inside of the PowerPoint. On your screen, that white box in the middle should be quite a bit bigger, so you can drag and drop files direct into there. All right. Okay, so once you get your contract modification, you get all the data put into it. It should look something like this, right? It should have all those green check boxes off on the left-hand side. That basically means that mod has been enacted. So you should have, when you go to the award CLINs, it will not reflect this modification, correct? Because the award CLINs will show what the CLINs were at the time of award. The current CLINs, however, will show that modification. Remember how the current CLINs had a $50,000 increase on the $8 million? That's that $50,000 modification to the line items that you're looking at right now. So those current CLINs had the 50,000 extra, 8 million, 50,000. Kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like. And again, here we have the contractor claims and disputes. How districts use this has been very different from one to the other. So we're really not going to have a lot to mention here other than, again, you can click that claims disputes button on the top right-hand corner to generate a report. You can here on this screen, it lets you know, if you didn't know, you can take those selection view tiles and you can drag and drop them to group them by certain things. So you can take the amount and drag and drop the amount up to that gray drag a column header here, and it will sort all the data in that screen below by the amounts. So if you have a whole bunch of claims that are $40,000, you can group them by that and sort them that way. And you can continue to group as well. So once you group by a report menu, you can group by author, and you can group by developed by, and you can just drag them off when you want to go back to the default view. So there's a lot of customization inside of RMS that isn't necessarily apparent, but it has to do with the new .NET way of how RMS 3 works with Windows 10, right? That was kind of the background, the reason why RMS 3.0 came out, because RMS 2.38 was based off of Windows 3.11 back in the day, right? So yeah. All right, moving on. Okay, this shows you, hey, this is what it looks like when you go and add a claim dispute. I have not gotten a lot of questions on this. This is probably something that's not used as often. Again, district policy. If your district requires this, you got to do it. If not, hey, you don't have to, right? So you can choose the type. You can go in and remember those blue boxes usually are a lookup. So you click that, it's going to come up with all the project managers in your district or contract and whatnot. Moving on. This is what a contractor claims report looks like. Obviously, you're working towards getting a report, right? So everything that you have will go to that report. Yeah. All right. I'm going to go on mute. You guys are more than welcome to unmute and ask questions. If I don't hear anything for 10, 15 seconds, we'll continue on. And we are like 80, 90% done. So those of you that are wondering when this will end, it shouldn't be too much longer, and then we can open up the floor for questions. All right, going on mute. Feel free to unmute. All righty, we'll get this show on the road. All right, so we're going to go over the schedules tab. I might need some of James's help here as well. The closeout, the import-export modules are, there's really not a lot to say on these when it comes to usage, how to use them. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask. All right, so this is a schedules module, kind of halfway through on the contract. When you open up a contract, that's what it looks like. All right, again, As a government user, you're probably not going to be doing much in these modules other than when you create the contract, you're going to go into milestones and, of course, set up the base milestones so that it's no longer a future contract. The contractor will go in and deal with the activity schedule. Usually, as we stated before, contractor is going to be doing the NAS Primavera. We get questions asked, is Primavera the only thing that can use the SDEF? No, it's not. SDEF is standard data exchange format. Back in the day when I started, there were companies that had, I don't know if it was Access or Excel that dealt with the SDEF. I'm not sure if they're around anymore today, but Primavera is kind of the industry standard, right? And there's a lot of companies out there that let you hire them just to do your schedule. So that's also fairly popular. And from most of the contracts that I've seen, most of them require Primaveras. So SDEF, Primavera pops out the SDEF, RMS imports the SDEF. That's why Primavera is the system of record for the activity schedule. A whole bunch of other stuff. Is a lot of other stuff that comes in the SDEF file. So you as the government, you're not going to be doing a lot in this area other than making sure the contractor is doing what they should, right? So inside of RMS, you do have the ability to manually do a start and finish on the activity schedule. So say your contract's a smaller contract or the contractor doesn't have Primavera, you go in the contract setup and you can go to schedules tab and you can set it to manually enter start and finish dates. That means they do everything inside of RMS. And then they can come in here, they being the contractor, can come in here and they can enter in their schedule. They can also go inside of the daily reports and do the actual dates, right? So usually inside of RMS, when you go inside the activity schedule, one set of dates is grayed out, right? The other set of dates is in the daily reports. That's how it's designed. Or if they're doing SDEF, it comes from SDEF, right? From Primavera. Again, you as a government, you're not going to be doing much in here other than looking, right? Okay. The milestone schedule. This is important because these dates fire off a whole bunch of background information on the contract. If you guys can imagine, those of you that have done coding, if you looked at the milestone programming code, it is astounding. It is amazing. It's many thousands of lines of code. All this will start off everything else: daily reports, how long the contract's working on, the code behind the placement, the status reports is tremendous. All that is based off of this milestone schedule. Again, you call us up and you say, what date can I put in here? We can tell you. You can put any date that you want. What date should it be? That's entirely up to your contract, your district. We really can't tell you that. We can tell you what will happen if you put certain dates in there. For example, you need to put the award duration in. If you don't put the award duration in, that's also going to cause problems, right? There's usually a handful of system level milestones like the NTP, the contract start, the finish, and all that stuff that need to be set up in order for the contract to work right. Contractor cannot do daily reports until the NTP is put in. It will prevent them. You can't do finances until the contract award date's put in. It'll prevent that. So milestones are fairly important. Again, you're probably going to set these once and not change them. Just FYI, if you do go back later and change them, there's consequences to that, right? Because that's going to mess up how stuff's been done, and it will possibly mess up invoices and other things. So you don't want to really come in here and change stuff around. That's what the modifications are for. Modifications are where you do the official changes to the contract. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact the RMS Support Center, because if I was a government person working in this module, and I needed to change something, I'd be like, hey, I need to change this value. What's going to happen when I change this value? You can do that. That's totally cool. We can answer that question. We can't really answer what scheduled date should I put in for the NTP? We have no idea. All right, moving on. And again, those blue tiles kind of help you sort the information on that screen. And here we go, the placement schedule. So this, those of you that have worked in RMS for a while, you probably know that the placement schedule is kind of okay. There's a lot that goes here. You could have a class on this that goes for days. This allows you to set the placement graph for the contract. I've been working here since 2005, and when I started early on, it was very common for me to get a government person to call me up and go, "Hey, my contract's not going according to plan, and this graph is red. I need you to help me make this graph green." And so, RMS has a lot of different ways that you can make that graph green. And of course, headquarters doesn't like that. CFMS doesn't like that. Financing and all that stuff, they don't like that. But that was one of the things that we at RMS got from all the districts was, you must give us a ton of different ways to make this graph the way we want it to be. So that's what this screen is. A fair amount of warning. Those of you that have worked in this screen, you change this after the contract started, there will be problems, and you can get to points of no return. And when I say no return, that includes for us here at the RMS Support Center. You can get to the point where there's just no way to fix your placement schedule. And for a lot of people, placement does not do exactly what they want it to do. And so a lot can be said on this. And that's something that we've gotten for training requests, right? Is I want to know what every single value on this does. And I've been in classes where they spent days going over every single thing on this screen, and most of it was over my head at the time. And it's right now we're just letting you guys know what it looks like, kind of going through it, touching on every single module. But keep in mind that changing these values after placement's been done and there is progress or whatnot on the contract can result in getting to the point of no return. So you can call us up and we can help you on this. One thing to keep in mind is that I believe headquarters is coming out with a redesign of this module, kind of a standardization, I guess. I have not seen it, but so changes to this module are not being done at this point in time, but if there are bugs or things that aren't quite working right, or one of the common things are you change something and it doesn't actually change the contract status sheet or the other reports, right? We can help you with that. So, and again, as usual, we do help a lot of people make this graph green when it's not green, right? Because nothing ever goes to plan, right? That's why I think one of the most common requests for the screen is I want the schedule of what it looked like when the contract started. I want the schedule of what it looks like now. And I want the schedule of what it looks like if I do this and I do that. So one of the changes that we made in the past was the ability to have as many graphs as you wanted. But that was, I think headquarters is coming out with the standard that has some of that in mind, I believe. So anyway, that's all I can really say on this, other than this is fairly complicated stuff, even from my perspective. I've been in classes where they spend days on this, and it's amazing how complicated some of this stuff can be. The code behind this is pretty scary. All right. Okay, future schedule. Government, you're not going to be doing much in this, right? You're not going to be dealing with any of this. This should come from the contractor, from the contractor's S-Stuff import, right? And this stuff, like we were saying, the pay activities, they get matched to the features get matched to, three-phase inspections. They get, it branches out into a ton of different stuff. So it's kind of important that when a contract starts, the contractor gets their S-Stuff schedule correct. They do everything the right way. And they don't wait until the last day to try to match all this up, right? Because this is supposed to be something you set and go forward with, not go back and try to fill it out, because that's not going to work, right? It's usually best to do everything right away. Of course, I can tell you, having spent enough time here, that's not always been the case. All right, we'll take a quick set of questions on those modules before we move on to, I believe, import and export, and we're nearing the end. I'll go on silent for about 5-10 seconds. If I don't hear anything, I'll start up again. Feel free to unmute and ask questions. Alrighty, perfect. All right, so I believe the last part of this is the import export. There really is not much to say on this. So what I'm going to do is I'll say as much as I can, and we should be done fairly quickly. And then we can open up for any questions that you guys have. All right, in the import export module, that's kind of the farthest most module right before you get to the contract reports. This is where you're going to be inputting data inside of RMS. A lot of times the government's not going to be doing much in these modules. Obviously we have an import P2, we've got import from other contract, specs intact, deficiencies, submittals, the NAS, which the contractor does mostly, and a little known document package export. Very few government people know that we have the ability to mass export out document packages for the contract. So say your contract goes under audit, instead of going into every single daily report for the last 3 years, you can mass export out all the document packages in the daily report. So obviously that assumes that RMS3 was used to populate all those document packages over those 3 years, right? And generate the daily report in the document package. It was signed and all that stuff. So RMS can only output the data that was put into it, right? And not just daily reports. I think we have transmittals and a few other areas, and obviously definitely send off your requests to the CCB. They take the most common requests for features and they vote on them and send them our way, and then we implement them. So definitely work with your local CCB rep to get changes, especially new document package exports out. All right, so P2. Obviously, importing from P2 is a background process right now. We don't have the ability to fire off a download now just yet. I think they're trying to work on there's that new web-based module in P2 that we're working on interfacing with in dealing with the current issues, syncing issues that we have right now. So that's kind of priority. Once that gets done, we can look at doing another import now button, which by 2.38, you had to do everything manually, right? So, all right, moving on. Import submittals. So this is usually something you do at the start of the contract. You're going to download that template, and you're going to fill out that template, input the contract number in there, contract ID, and conform to that template. Which, by the way, RMS 3.0, you don't have to convert to CSV anymore. You can leave it in XLSX format and import a whole bunch of submittals. There's a fair number of contracts out there where the government will pre-fill out a submittal register for the contractor. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. And so that's why the default is override existing submittals, because you're only going to use this at the start of the contract, right? But keep in mind, when you import that, the default is to override existing submittals. Very rarely, very, very rarely are you going to be doing this later on in the contract, right? But if you do, make sure to do merge with existing submittals. We have a big warning message that'll let you know, are you sure you're going to wipe out stuff if you do this? So it's not like you hit that button and boom, end of the world, right? But anyway, keep that in mind. Obviously, RMS has the ability to have multiple submittal registers if your contract has that or whatnot. RMS has the ability to copy data from another contract. So if you're one of those district administrators that goes in and adds contracts to RMS, you can set up a template for all your contracts and then copy them out to a whole bunch of other contracts in one go, right? So it's a little bit of a handy option there. So this is usually something only a district administrator would do. If you're a contract user on the government side, and you know that contract XYZ has a list of subcontractors that this contract has, you can copy those over with this option. And it saves quite a bit of time, right? So again, something not really well known when it comes to RMS operations. Same thing here. Certain district was asking for the ability to export out the mod list in a certain way. So this feature you can export out to a clipboard so they can copy and paste into their specific application that they were using at the time and export to file if you want to. I believe those are, contract changes. Specs intact. Those districts that do use specs intact, you can go in here and you can add those files and import them in, kind of like the S stuff. With 2.38, you guys remember when you did an SF import or a specs intact import, that was it, right? You did the import, boom, done. With 3.0, it maintains a history of the files that you import inside of RMS, the history or whatnot. But anyway, usually I think you do this at the start, and I'm not sure if this is done on a monthly basis or not, because usually it's I believe from what I understand it is done once. But anyway, so you hit the add button, you point to that, I forget what file it is. It's like a 4288 or something like that text file, and it'll import that in. All right. Okay, so that's pretty much the import export. Don't forget the that's a lot of modules. Don't forget the document package export. That is a powerful tool. You hit that document package export, and you can export out all the document packages for the transmittals, the daily reports. Keep in mind too, if your contract is one of those 2 terabyte contracts, it's going to take some time, right? But if it's an average contract, you can export out all those document packages fairly quickly into a nice little zip file, especially if your contract's being audited or whatnot, right? So keep that in mind. That document package export is a really nice feature to get all that information out. Okay, moving on. Okay, Closeout. Closeout is one of those modules where not a lot of districts use it. When I say that, it's kind of a generalization. There are districts that use it. There are districts that don't. Some districts I know, they have a group of people assigned to closing out contracts, and some of those contracts are 5-10 years old. Here you've got the real property screens, so the property that the government has, whether or not it's going to be transitioned from the contractor to the government. We do have a CPARs screen, but RMS does not interface with CPARs anymore. So that's just information that you put inside of RMS. A lot of districts don't use that anymore because of the fact that we don't interface with CPARs anymore. Warranty tracking, that can also be done inside of RMS. One of the new features inside of RMS that was done with the CCB change is the contractor in contractor mode now has the ability to help out the government with the interim 1354. So the contractor can go in here and fill out a lot of this stuff for you guys to help move this process along. Obviously, they don't know a lot of the stuff on the screen, but they can help get it started. And then you guys can take that interim 1354, approve it, and finalize it off and send it off, right, for government acceptance. A lot of times we really can't help you out with what to put in here, but we can tell you what happens when you put stuff in here. Again, when the contractor works on these interim ones, you can go in here and accept them, and it'll help fill out a lot of information, because kind of the goal of RMS is to get the contractor to do as much data input as possible for y'all, right? So, and just like a lot of the modules in RMS, when you get to the point where you want to see what the form looks like, on the top right-hand corner, click that button, gives you an idea of what it looks like before it's finished. You can have as many items as you want on that screen, right? If there's any deficiencies, again, your district is real important to conform to how your district does things. I know that there's teams of government users that are their whole job every day is to go in and process contract closeout for the district. And they're dealing with contracts that are 5, 10, maybe even more years old, right? So they're opening up these contracts and trying to finalize them, close them out, and we sometimes spend quite a bit of time helping them out to get to that point, right? Because it's kind of hard to take something that's been out there for a long period of time and get it to the point of closeout. So at this point of the totaling, yeah. So here are the transfers. That all the data put into this module. Your whole goal is to get to that, to see what the project cost is, right, for the equipment and whatnot. So again, you can add a document package at the bottom. You can drag and drop tons of stuff in there. So just so you guys know, those modules inside of RMS, if your district doesn't require you to put all the modules in there, you're more than welcome just to take a document package and dump the documents in there, right? So we get some districts that go, our district requires us to use XYZ program or XYZ form, and that's not in RMS. Well, scan it in and you can drop it into RMS. And then guess what? Every document package that you have, if you complete it, that gets sent off to PCF, right? Paperless contracting file. And that's a requirement with the core. Everything has to go off to PCF, right? So every document package that you have inside of RMS, that document package, when you complete it off, that'll go off to RMS, which is also why we try to get you guys to digitally sign those documents, right? Because PCF doesn't like unsigned documents. But anyway, every document package that you complete will go off to PCF. So you can drag and drop a whole bunch of those forms into a document package, complete the document package, boom, good to go. All right, contract reports. Really not much to say here other than when you do go to the reports, you can generate the closeout reports. So you can group by report menu if you want to, and it'll show all the closeout reports, the warranty inspections, the CPARs, the 1354 or whatnot. Not much to say here other than this is how you run the reports, right, if you want to. All right, here's the transfer property for government furnished property. Really, again, not much to say here other than it will have a history of what was transferred. You can add and deal with that. This is kind of a record, right? of property transfer between the government. And again, you can run the 1149 on the top right hand corner just to see what it looks like, right? So, all right, moving on. Not much really to say about this. Does everything have to be filled out? No, you can do whatever you want to do here on that aspect. Usually you want to fill it out as much as possible to get to that end report. Again, RMS does not interface with CPARs anymore. So you can export out to a file, I believe. And a lot of contracts still put information in here just for record, right? So 5-10 years down the road, when a closeout team is looking at everything, they can go, all right, this is what's happened. It helps everyone when information is put in correctly, right? So while I said you don't have to put information into RMS, it definitely helps later on, because I've dealt with quite a few of the closeout teams. They're trying to make sense of what a contract was 5-10 years from now. It's real helpful to have that information in there. All right, and here's the warranty tracking. Again, this is not required, so you can not check those boxes where the inspections are required, or you can check those boxes. And the request that we got from most of the districts was the warranty inspection screen that you had was not useful. Just make it a document package. We want to drag and drop the documents in here. So that's what we did. This was back when we were designing 3.0. So the idea is you create a document package, you drag and drop the scanned documents in. And that's how most of the districts want it. I think there's a couple districts that they do things a different way and they'd like things differently. Again, contact your CCB rep, make sure they know how this impacts your work schedule, because that's how changes happen to RMS. But again, you just put in the dates. The idea behind this is the document package. Again, that document package, when you complete the document package, that goes off to PCF. Okay. Oh, yep. Another screen of what it looks like for the warranty tracking. You can put in remarks. You don't have to put in remarks. Most of the time I've seen these being used, they just scan those warranty documents in and drag and drop them in here for record. Yep, and that's it. All right, perfect. So what I'm going to do is, first off, thank you guys very much for attending this training. We really appreciate it. I see a lot of great questions that were asked in the Q&A section and in the chat. I'm going to go on mute for a minute. You guys are more than welcome to unmute and ask questions. We've got some people here that should be able to answer those questions. And yeah, all right, I'll go on mute. I'll yell.
All right. Thank you, Paul, for all these explanations. It was interesting. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Just so you all know as well, we'll be posting this WebEx on our YouTube channel. I think it takes about 5 business days for us to, to edit it out and whatnot. All the other WebExes are on there as well. Obviously, going forward, training will be a little bit different than what it was. So each quarter, we'll have training that it'll include the changes done since the last time and all that stuff. But yeah, that YouTube channel. A good place for people that couldn't make it, and if you know that there's something helpful in here, we try to on YouTube. You can categorize what's inside the video, so you can just skip to where you want to go. So that we have that in there as well.
All right, thanks, Paul. Begin with the RMS PMO. I want to thank everybody for attending today.
Okay, understand. Thank you. P2 told me that we have to have the codes entered, so we had those. The issue is that RMS doesn't find the P2 even though the codes are in there. So I was wondering if maybe this is because it's I'm trying to link services contract versus construction. But I'll reach out back to P2 and see if they can figure it out.
Well,
Right, you can also put a ticket in with the RMS Support Center and we can take a look at it and we can see what P2 put in. If those contracts, if those projects are available to us, we can see what codes are there. If they don't have the RMSA code in for the main construction project task, then we will not see it at all. So yes, it would go back to P2 at that point.
Right. It finds our construction program P2s, but it doesn't find any of the services. So that's why I'll submit a ticket to P2 and see what they have to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Good question. All righty. I think we'll shut this down. Have a good day, good evening, good afternoon.